Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to ask the board members here to put their mics on and test them before we do anything else. So as part of your test is my name is, and I am blah, blah, blah.
Michelle.
Yes, my name is Michelle and I am blah, blah, blah. All right, so who wants to test their mic first?
Hi, my name is Sally Cross, and I am a largely retired fundraiser, and I'm the chair of the newly elected chair of the board of Woodland Pond, which I'm excited about.
Okay, thumbs up. Could you hear Sally? Yeah. Okay, next. Okay, a little louder.
Okay. Hi, I'm Chris Maroon. I have absolutely no responsibility with Woodland Pond. I'm the retired chair after being on the board for 9 years. I'm still participating as a emeritus member, and if the board will have me back as a voting member, maybe they'll talk 11 months. I own Beyond Wealth Management, an independent registered investment advisory firm in town. Serve clients nationally. We do a lot of work with higher net worth, estate planning. We try to keep more money out of IRS's hands and more money in yours, your kids, and of course, lovely not-for-profit institutions like Woodland Pond.
Okay, so I know you could hear him, but one thing I am going to just mention to all of you, because I get this all the time, slow, very slow. I knew you were going to say it. Chris is like me, actually they all are, in that their brains are filled with so much good information. We just spit it out too fast. So just slow.
Hello, I'm Tracy Badgley. I'm a partner with PKF O'Connor Davies. I am a CPA, and I'm here to help you navigate some of the new tax laws and how it impacts charitable contributions and what you can do if you want to and you're led to.
And Tracy's been on the board for 8
or 9 years.
8 or 9 years. Yeah. So we've got a lot of depth on the bench here. So today, the goal of what we're going to do today is we're hoping this can be a little bit more conversational and that questions that you have can be answered related to these three professionals. Some of the general questions about the capital campaign and the PAC we'll reserve for Dave and I if we have time. Otherwise, I have a really good idea of what your questions continue to be from the Survey Monkey. You did a fantastic job of letting us know what the questions still are. But before we kick this off, just want to level set with everyone. So the images that you see for the new Performing Arts Center, that project is happening regardless of whether we do a capital campaign or not. I want to make sure everybody's clear on that. This project is affordable for Woodland Pond, but in terms of the scope, it's affordable in the 2028 financing. So the capital campaign that we are considering does two things. It accelerates the commencement of building of the PAC, which is going to happen regardless, to fall of this year, and which means you get in there several years earlier than expected. And the other thing that this allows us to do is save on 30 years of interest on $7 million. And we haven't really talked about that in detail, but we did have a really important exercise, I think, with the Finance Committee of the residents. We asked the Finance Committee of the residents to do their own calculation as to what they thought that interest cost was based on a $7 million project financed over 30 years at our rate at 6.5%. That interest cost alone on the $7 million project is $15 million. So if we do this through a capital campaign, it accelerates it and it saves your future neighbors $15 million in interest just on the PAC. So there's a real value to doing this now. Everything is also cheaper today than it will be in 2028. But we can talk about all of those things at another time. I don't want to lose the valuable time of our professionals here. So I'm going to ask the first question. I don't care which one of you answers, but please explain to me how, if I was a resident and wanted to make a contribution to this capital campaign, should we go forward? Why would it be potentially tax beneficial? How would a donation to Woodland Pond be beneficial to me?
I suppose I can start with that. So there are several ways that you can make contributions. I don't know if, and we're going to preface this with, if everybody has financial advisors or accountants, that you should speak to them. We're giving you general knowledge here and general information. So speak to whoever knows your stuff. We do not have your tax returns here. We don't know what your income is, so we can only speak on a general level. So some of the things are big things. So the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which we have been calling OBA, makes a lot of changes in 2026. So a lot of things we'll talk about today are accelerating contributions into 2025 so that you don't have to navigate those hurdles. So one of the big things that I don't know that anybody or everybody knows about is something called a qualified charitable distribution. That's where you can take money out of an IRA. If you're over 70 and a half, some of you might not be having to take RMDs, but if you're over 70 and a half, you can take money out of your IRA to the tune of $108,000 per person. So that's $216,000 per married couple. And that reduces your adjusted gross income. It goes directly from your IRA to the charity, or to Woodland Pond, I should say. That avoids your inflating you don't get a deduction, but it doesn't come into your income. So it's basically a wash. You take it out of the IRA, it goes to Woodland Pond, and there's no deduction, but no, it's not coming into your income. What that does also is it decreases your adjusted gross income so that for IRMA purposes, for Medicare purposes, your income is lower. So when they look at that and they look at how much you have to pay extra for your IRMA contributions, your income is lower for that. So that's one thing. You want to
So Tracy, can I just ask a clarifying question on that? Because I thought I heard you say two things. I thought at first I heard you say that it doesn't add to your AGI, your adjusted gross income, but then I thought I heard you say it reduces it. Can you clarify that? So
Yes.
let's say your AGI is
okay.
100,000.
Right. So if your income is 100,000, if you normally would take your IRA distribution for $50,000, your income would be $150,000 if you took the IRA distribution and then you took that $50,000 and then contributed. You would be subject to certain limitations on your itemized deductions, and only if you itemize deductions. If you do what we call a QCD, your income, that $50,000 goes directly to the charity, and you're only taxed on $100,000. It reduces your income to $100,000. Well, it doesn't reduce your income. It does not increase your income. Thank you for clarifying.
Okay. So how is that different than a required minimum distribution?
So a required minimum so that's one thing. So sometimes you're required to take a distribution out of your IRA. Sometimes people don't need that money. Sometimes people say, well, I have to take that money out and I don't really need it. I have other sources of income that can pay for the things that I need. I don't really need it. So instead of taking the required minimum distribution, you can make that distribution go directly to Woodland Pond, and you'd have to take the required minimum distribution, but you don't have to include it in your income.
So is that the same thing as this qualified charitable
It is.
distribution?
It is, but so your required minimum distribution might only be $25,000. This qualified contribution allows you to do up to $108,000. So
Okay.
you can do it both ways.
Okay. Gotcha. So it's distributing it directly to the charity, and you could do it for your required minimum distributions plus X dollars up to $108,000 per person per tax year.
For tax
Correct.
year.
Per tax year.
Exactly. Yeah.
I would also ask that I add that you can do this out of your IRA once you're 70 and a half, but you don't have required minimum distributions until you're 73. So even if you're not quite hitting that 73 where you're going to have required minimum distributions, you can still not have some taxable income and make a generous gift to Woodland Pond.
Okay, let's take a question or two on that concept. I'm also taking notes, and we're going to get this out in writing, the topics that we cover here, okay? This is also going to be on our YouTube channel.
So what you're talking about is for this year, 2025. And so my question is, does that change in 2026 because of the recently passed legislation?
No, it does not, although the 108,000 limit that will not be counted towards income is indexed to inflation, so it will be slightly higher next year.
Thank you.
And just to add in, if I may, that it's a very efficient way to go. If you do, a lot of people make charitable donations to different institutions and they do it out of cash. But if it has to hit your tax return first and increase your adjusted gross income, it's much more efficient to have the money go right from your IRA. And a lot of people can give a little more money by having the funds go from their IRA to the qualified charity than have it pass through their pockets. So you can give the same, keep the IRS out of it. Maybe you can give a little more. Maybe you can get out of, in 2 years from now, your Medicare premium being higher, because we all know IRMA is just another tax. And if your income gets above a certain threshold, you have the privilege and joy of paying more on your Medicare premiums.
What's our IRA?
IRMA. What is IRMA?
Oh, IRMA is if your income exceeds basically your premium for Medicare Part B is means tested. So the more means you have, the more income you bring in. As it crosses certain thresholds, I forgot the numbers offhand, but it goes from like 130 to 2 something to 4 something per month. So if somebody does a little bit of planning and get their income below that next threshold, that next bracket for Medicare premiums, you could save $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 per year just by planning a little bit.
Paul? Vanna is coming. For my low heels.
Some of us here have, when we leave Woodland Pond, we return, we get back 50 to 90% of what we paid to come in here. Can that be drawn on because it's not income, it's what we already own, and be used as a charitable contribution, part of it?
Michelle's going to have to answer that.
Yeah.
Under the New York State regs, the only way you can access that refund before your contract terminates is if you prove a need for financial assistance. So those monies would not be available, not be permitted as long as you don't have a need for financial assistance, in which case we wouldn't want you to make a contribution to the campaign anyway, because we'd want you to hang on to that money. Larry?
And just while Michelle's walking, I want to go back to RMDs, the required minimum distributions, for a minute. A lot of people plan just one tax year at a time. Often with clients, we look out many, many years and we can identify that you might have it's a good problem to have, but an RMD problem. And with an RMD, mine's coming and going.
Chris, just spread that mic up there.
If we look out many years in the future, you might see that your RMDs are going to start growing and growing and growing and become much larger than you would need them to be. Because most people have your Social Security, which thankfully does grow. We'll leave Social Security for the future out of this for now, though. You might have pensions, and you might have dividends and interest. And they're going to be there and they're going to grow. Often we want to accelerate distributions from pre-tax retirement accounts. So if somebody might have a $50,000 required minimum distribution, we're often looking at, let's take out more sooner so we can have the dividends and interest, which are much more tax efficient, be what you rely on in the future and let those grow a little bit more. So in situations like this, you might look at maybe doing the 108,000, getting more money out of your IRAs sooner, so you have less required distributions in the future, less required taxable income in the future, when that's paired against letting your dividends and interest grow. Because if you have municipal bond interest, that's obviously state and federal income tax free, and long-term capital gains and qualified dividends are taxed at much lower rates than ordinary income. But your IRA distributions are always taxed at the highest rate. So sometimes we want to pick what bucket to pull from a little sooner and maybe more aggressively, because that will help your longer term tax perspective. And
So
when you're
wait,
leaving,
Can I just interrupt you for a second? Because I'm afraid we might get a little bit too into the weeds. If
No.
you're a resident
Mhm.
and you're hearing what you're saying and it's a little confusing, it's confusing to me too. What is the question to ask my financial advisor?
show me year by year RMD distributions against my needed cash flow. And is it far exceeding it? If yes, can we do something to rejigger that?
Or
Okay.
like specific to this capital campaign, how would you phrase, I'm considering giving a gift to this capital campaign.
Mhm.
Can you help me figure out the most tax beneficial way to do this?
That's
Is that how you
exactly,
would say it?
that's exactly it.
Question.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And then in a long-term planning though, all of us are going to change our cosmic addressed sometimes. If you use up a little more of your pre-tax IRA money, that's going to get, your beneficiaries are going to have to pay income tax on that. So if you use a little more of that for things like this, leaving them more of the taxable accounts under current tax law, always have to say that, that money gets left to them completely tax-free and they won't owe any income tax on that when it's passed to them. So if I inherit an IRA, I'm going to have to add that to my income. If I inherit stocks, bonds, whatever, real estate, I'm going to get that at the current value and pay no tax. So it's more efficient in many, many ways to look at this type of planning. I'm sure you all do it with your current financial advisor.
So the IRAs are a real opportunity specifically. Okay.
The
Larry,
least efficient.
One more thing I just
I-
want to say, I'm sorry, Larry, one more thing before. I just want to say with the RMD, you also still get to take your itemized deduction, which is about 30,000, I don't know the exact amount, it changes every time, but about $30,000. You still get that itemized deduction in addition to making that RMD charitable, or the qualified charitable contribution.
Okay, I have no traditional pension. I have a 403B. That is by far the bulk of my assets. Unlike a pension, it is under my control. My income, which allows me to continue to live here, comes almost entirely from that RMD year after year. A little boosted along the way with Social Security, but that's a very small part of it. So if I take 100 grand or 200 grand out of my 403B, that's going to reduce permanently my income. I have to be very careful not to do that.
wouldn't that also be counteracted by improvements in the market?
That's over the long term, absolutely. It really depends on your planning horizon.
Yeah, I think you really, everybody's situation is
It's
different.
I mean, that's why the
And what you're-
conversation with your advisor is so important.
Yeah, I
because
mean, that's really
see
the
your whole
ticket
picture,
here.
right?
We don't want you to outlive your pensions here and reduce them to a point where you're not going to be able to pay your monthly expenses without that.
Now, my income is my pension and my social security. My wife's income is from social security and her retirement account. The current administration leads us to believe that they want to cut social security, they want to cut Medicare. And so our income, we don't know what our income is going to be in 2-3 years. It could be much less. And we need the money from our accounts more.
If I may. Sure.
I could say the same thing. Lionel, we've heard that from a number of residents, that's a fear. There's absolutely no indication, I'm looking all of you in your eye, that any of the current cuts would impact the eligibility for Medicare or Social Security to anybody in this room. The cuts that are being targeted are targeted to people that probably didn't qualify in the first place and continue to not qualify. We've also explained we get impacted by Medicare cuts every single year. So every year we have takebacks for Medicare. They come back retroactively, same thing with Medicaid. So while it's happening behind the scenes, you're not feeling it, but we are, and we roll with it. But I think it's really important that everyone do your own research, get your news from different sources, and understand seniors that are eligible for Medicare and Social Security right now are not the target of any legislation. It is people that probably shouldn't have qualified in the first place.
And or because Congress has to pass any of these changes into
Right.
law. What they've done in the past, and those of you who are younger than most people in this room, is that they wait and they put the cuts in terms of eligibility age on people who have yet to start to take their Social Security. Because let's be honest, this is a political decision, and no politician wants to alienate a large percentage of their base by cutting their current benefits. It's always easier to take away something that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
And when people use the word Medicare, normally they mean Medicaid. Medicaid is being attacked greatly, but most of you are using Medicare. So, and we don't expect much. We have to be very clear on what we're talking about. With Social Security, I agree. As Sally said, and it's something they keep kicking down the road, and they're probably going to just borrow more money to maintain current benefits and kick the can down the road. Because I cannot see a congressperson saying, "Hi, I'm going to cut your benefits by 25% and vote for me."
100%.
That's not going to happen.
They will tell me that.
And they're telling me
I'm
that.
going to get Social Security,
Right.
but they're not going to take it away from somebody that currently has it. That would be political suicide.
Could someone decide to donate to this fund by transferring ownership of stocks or bonds that have not appreciated very much, but Woodland Pond would have to pay some tax once they own these stocks or bonds? But if we picked stocks or bonds that have not appreciated much, could one transfer the ownership to Woodland Pond?
That's a great.
So
That's a great question.
Before, I just wanted to say, so we've done enough on the RMDs, and I was going to go to donating stock. So that was our next step. So I was going to ask Chris to talk about that.
I'm just standing so I can see the smiling faces in the back. So we often do this. Normally someone would look at their portfolio and they have some investments. Often it's the reverse of what you might have said, which is you have a stock you bought for $10 and now it's worth a gazillion. And if I sell that stock, a stock I bought for 100 and now it's worth $1 million, I'm gonna have $900,000 of capital gains. And that's gonna get hit with a good chunk of taxes. Still lower than ordinary income. I'd rather pay 20% than 37%, but so be it. That stock could be donated to Woodland Pond, and Woodland Pond would sell the stock. So if you sold it, you'd owe taxes on $900,000 in this example. Woodland Pond sells it. We're not for profit. We don't pay anything, but you get the tax deduction on the current fair market value. So if somebody wanted to make a donation to Woodland Pond and I'm going to sell stock and then give it to Woodland Pond, it's going to get picked up on your income tax return, and you don't get all the deductibility all the time. There's a lot of caps on that. But it's a lot easier to donate a highly appreciated stock, or if you did have a stock worth a lot that you bought a share for $1 million and you're giving it to us for $1 million, that's fine. You're still going to get that charitable deduction for the fair market value within certain limits that your accountant figures out. But it's normally better to give something appreciated. And we can accept stocks, bonds. We could accept, I've been involved in things where a business interest is transferred to a charity. The charity sells the business, getting that family out of all of those capital gains. On real estate, there's something called, if people have real estate, there's depreciation recapture, which it's a tax rate higher than capital gains. We can get out of that. There's lots of things that we can do, so we can talk about those different circumstances.
Mentioned, Ronnie, so I'll come to you in 1 second. A couple of people asked in the Survey Monkey, how can Woodland Pond accept charitable donations? How are you coded a certain way with the IRS? Because not all not-for-profits and charities are coded the same way. If you go to the IRS website, there are certain types of entities that can accept charitable donations. Woodland Pond has that designation. We verified that. You all concur with that? We can take things directly. I'll go to Ronnie's question, and then I want to have somebody talk about donor advised funds, because we did mention that as a possibility, as a place to donate to anonymously.
just one more thing I wanted to say. On the appreciated stock, you're limited to 30% of your adjusted gross income on that. So if your adjusted gross income is $100,000, you can only donate $30,000 of appreciated stock. But yes, so there is a carry for, so you can only do that. So you can only do that in 1 year, and then you can carry forward for 5 years. You can carry forward the rest of that donation.
Okay, let me go to Ronnie and then I'll go to Bill.
Just two clarifications on that. One is, did you say we could transfer ownership or sell the stocks and bonds?
Transfer the ownership.
Transfer the ownership.
Yeah.
You would sell it.
Correct.
You would not to have to pay tax on it,
That's correct.
but we would have to pay tax.
Nope.
We would not have to pay
No.
tax on the appreciation.
No, it
No.
would be a charitable gift for the fair market value. And if you're itemizing on your income taxes, then it is a deductible charitable gift.
Thank you.
Sorry. How does that differ than if I hold on to it, I die, and my kids get it? What's the tax impact of that?
There's not. It goes to them at the fair market value. They do not pay taxes.
Okay.
They
all right.
get-
until they liquidate it.
Correct.
So the
Correct.
charity can liquidate it and not pay taxes, but any individual person, whether it's you or your heirs that get that, would pay on the fair market value.
That's correct.
Okay.
Well, not you. No, you couldn't. Well, you will pay it on whatever the gain is. If somebody dies, you get what's called excuse me, a step up in basis, and your heirs receive that stock at whatever the value is at the date of death.
So that the amount of deduction is the fair market value.
That's
and
correct.
That's a 30% limit.
That's right.
And
Any 1 year,
Per year.
right? So if you.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And does that also apply to mutual funds
Yes.
or
Anything.
anything, stocks and bonds is
Any marketable-
a shorthand for anything that Fidelity or Vanguard or any T. Rowe Price would be selling you?
Yes.
I'll say, because I have a thing on the mechanics of how we do it, if people want to hear that later, any legally marketable security or any legal entity can be handled this way.
Question about the carryover. So let's say that I bought Apple for $1 and now it's worth 100, but my 30% of my AGI is 30,000. So I can only get a tax benefit in the year that I donate of 30. Let's say I donate the entire thing in 2025. That's $100,000 value to Woodland Pond, $100,000 write-off for your charitable contribution, but only capped at 30. Then next year, my tax preparer can take the next 30.
Well,
And then
not
the
whatever
next-
your AGI is.
Okay, 30% of your
Instead that
AGI. Let's just say,
AGI
let's say it stays
each year.
flat.
Yeah,
So I can take 30 this year, 30 next year, up to 5 years, or up to the 100,000.
that's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Questions on those things? All right. We talked about, for the question that had arisen about, I would like to make a donation, but I don't necessarily want anyone to know what it is. What are some anonymous donation vehicle options that can still do record keeping for us, et cetera? Chris, you brought forward the idea of something called a donor advised fund, and a number of folks were interested in that, but didn't totally understand that. Can you do like donor advised funds for dummies with me being the dummy?
I'll do it. I'll do that. So a donor advised fund is a fund, and some of you in the room may have them already. Some of you in the room may have them even with the community foundations where I used to work. So a donor advised fund is a fund that is sponsored by a charitable organization, and it's where you make a gift, a charitable gift to that organization in 1 year. It's held and accounted for in your name, whatever you call the fund. And so you get the tax deduction for the total amount of that gift in the year that you make it. Right. So you say you have the highly appreciated stock, say you have that Apple stock and you've got $100,000 of appreciated Apple stock. Now you might only want to give 75,000 of that to Woodland Pond, but you can set up the whole amount into a donor advised fund. And then what you do is it's called recommending a grant. This is frankly a fig leaf with the IRS. That's what makes it's what makes your gift a completed gift eligible for a charitable deduction. in the year that you make it. The only time any DAF, donor advised fund provider, would not approve your grant recommendations is if the recommended entity was no longer a charity, right? Or had never been a charity. So sometimes people are mistaken about the charitable status. A lot of very small charities forget to file the postcard with the IRS and they lose their tax status. That was actually fairly common with small groups at the Community Foundation. So from that grant, that fund, that's your fund, whatever you want to call it. Mine at the Community Foundation is, the Cross Han Charitable Fund, really, secret there of who we are. And then I can recommend grants to any charitable entity, especially Woodland Pond, of course. And those grants can also be anonymous. So that is one anonymous route. And Chris is able to offer a donor advised fund option through his facility that is no fee.
I just want to say one thing about these donor advised funds. So unless it has the same limitations of 30% of appreciated stock, but if it's a cash donation, it's 60% of your adjusted gross income. So in that case, what we were talking about before, now you have a $60,000 donation. If you make 100,000, and then you only have $40,000 to carry over to the next year. Now,
Things we're talking about now are if you are really working around a significant tax liability.
right.
But you can just donate if you're not worried about the tax liability. You're not subject to these caps. The caps only apply to how much gets tax benefit, right?
I would say that if you're saving $1 or $2 in taxes, even with like positions that aren't really run up that high, it's worth looking at.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if something's got a comma in it and it could go to Woodland Pond or me not give it to the IRS, I'm interested in that.
Right.
So it's really not, it's not hard to do by any means. And often it might be something we mix. If there's something that you bought doesn't fit your portfolio anymore in a taxable account, not IRAs, taxable account. There's something that you bought for $9, can sell it for 10. Well, you might sell it and donate that because that $10 of cash you give to Woodland Pond, if it's cash, is 60% available on your tax return for deduction. The highly run-up stocks, those might be things you would transfer to Woodland Pond and let us sell them, and then you don't have to pay the tax on it, and you might have a big deduction this year and some deductions that can carry forward from there.
But
So-
again, the question really is to my financial advisor, how can I accomplish this best? And are there any win-wins in here? Is there a way to get something to the capital campaign and also help my tax liability? But I don't want to give the solution to my professional advisor. We want this provider to give us the recommendation.
And your financial advisors can model this for you. They can look at your tax situation, they can take your tax return, and they could say, this is what's going to work best for you. And that's why we want you to speak to your personal financial advisors or CPAs.
I don't want to set false expectations, though. If you have a place where it's a 1-800 number for like index mutual funds, they say they're not going to be able to do this. I'm donating my time and my staff's time to help if anybody has questions on these, to be able to look through things, because if someone's a licensed financial advisor and operates as a fiduciary, like we can provide direct advice on things. We just need to see your tax return and some basic information. That might not happen at some of the 1-800 number places. So I just don't want to set false expectations. I just wanted to point out on the anonymous side of things, the mechanics would be if someone wanted to make a donation to Woodland Pond anonymously, wherever you're at, but we set up donor advised funds all the time. It's not hard to do. We would set it up. They handle all the record keeping for your taxes. The donation going from your account to Woodland Pond, whether it's appreciated stock or whatever makes sense, would go over to Woodland Pond. They'd receive it, but it wouldn't know where it came from. And then you would get all the tax documentation needed from the custodian saying what happened. So it's not a complicated thing, but we would have to set up an account to facilitate that if you wanted to do that anonymously.
And what we've talked about, because a lot of this is very complicated and we understand that, I would have no idea how to guide you on this. Basically, what we would indicate to you is if you're interested in doing this, You're just going to give us your name. You're going to sign a consent that we're going to give your information to Chris's firm. And then they're going to reach out to you and walk you through the entire thing. And if you have an existing financial advisor, they will be part of that mix as well. So we're not going to be trying to give you advice of how to handle it on your own. Either Chris and his firm, which are very graciously volunteering your time, working with your financial advisors, will take care of it as long as we know you're interested and you've signed a release. And then any information that you release would go directly to Chris and his people and would never come through Woodland Pond. Okay.
And on the topic of anonymous gifts, I also wanted to add that it's very simple to make a stock gift to anonymous because while it goes to Chris's firm and they're going to know who who it came from, you should, because you have to give them a heads up. It's for Woodland Pond. He doesn't have to tell Woodland Pond who that is. So you have, if you have an existing donor advised fund, if you want to set up one through Chris's firm, or if you want to make just a gift of stock where you'd like the whole amount to go to Woodland Pond, any of those are avenues for an anonymous gift.
I just want to reiterate how generous this is of Chris and his firm to do this for you and for Woodland Pond. So, I mean, we really appreciate that, and it's amazing.
I have a question about family trusts. Do they work well for this kind of situation?
Depends on the trust document, who the taxpayer is. But it probably, I think I'll say there's no one solution, and it's normally things working together. So I think there can be value for this with a family trust. It's probably irrevocable. Have to talk to your trustee. It's probably adult children. Then look at the other asset mix to see where's the opportunity in there. Because often people really silo what money comes from what place. And that's more of a mental math and a mental rubric that gets up, or matrix that gets applied. Sometimes we look at the bigger picture, there's more opportunities for tax savings, things coming from different places. And in a family trust, depending on how the rules are, it might, a lot of trusts that are irrevocable would be kicking out 5% or $5,000 or all interest and dividends. And the structure of the portfolio might be such that it might not be optimized for the rules of the trust. There's investment management and there's investment management for trusts. And the rules of the trust and the whole perspective needs to be kind of pulled in. But I would say probably after that long disclaimer.
So, and I would say, speak to the attorney who drew up the trust on that one. So we talked about financial advisors and accountants. If you're talking about trusts, you want to talk to your legal advisors.
So one of the things that I can let you know from a Woodland Pond perspective, I think, you know, we're at the point now that after questions today, we're going to be trying to make a decision about whether or not we're going to proceed with this capital campaign by Wednesday. And at that time, if we do proceed, there is going to be something called collateral material, which is basically a pamphlet that will explain, you know, what the purpose of this is, has our tax ID number, has some of these recommendations there, but that you can take and provide to your attorneys or financial advisors, lets them know what the basics are, you know, how this qualifies, what it's for, et cetera. But some of these things to be able to start the conversation so that you don't need to write it down on a piece of paper and then remember. I'm going to go to Halima and then I'm going to come to Bill.
If Woodland Pond is able to raise a significant amount of contributions, but falls short of its needed goal, which I think you said was 7 million, what happens to the monies that were contributed?
So this is really a matter of timing, and we talked about this extensively at the board meeting. It was my hope or initial plan, because I don't really know this as well as these folks do, that it would be a simple matter of returning the money. It's not that simple, because once you've received the tax benefit on it, particularly if it's in different years, it becomes extremely complicated. So what we will be asking is that for folks to say that I still want this money to go towards the project, because everything that we're borrowing is going to have an interest impact. So dollar for dollar, if we can reduce the amount of debt related to this project, and we can get a confirmation from you that, yes, I still want to contribute this, it will ultimately benefit Woodland Pond, but that will be a decision that you need to make. If somebody wasn't willing to do that, it gets really complicated, right? There's really no way to return it, right?
No. It's very complicated and it'll impact your taxes. Yeah, it's so Yeah, I mean, it can be done. It's generally not. I think what Michelle's talking about is have it go to the project. I think for any major gift, especially, we would want to have a gift agreement that stipulates that for each gift. So your gift, especially also if we haven't even gotten into the fun stuff like naming opportunities
Right.
and recognition.
Yeah.
So so that would all be outlined in the gift agreement, which we would craft with each donor to outline these uses.
So I think one of the things that we need to do here, this is obviously a unique situation overall, the way we're handling this. And just so that everybody understands, we did work with a consultant extensively, none of these folks, but a professional development consultant for several months at the beginning of last fall. And normally what would happen in these cases is that for the last couple of months, you all would have been secret shopped by a third-party professional that does secret shopping about taking your temperature and whether or not you'd be willing to give a gift. We did not feel that that was the right way to approach this at Woodland Pond. But we still have to have a decent sense of where we're going to land on this before we collect $1, to Halima's point. So we have been doing baby steps to try to take your temperature and determine roughly what percentage of people would like to give. We have not asked for any commitments. And I think at this point, we've said it enough times, we have to get the money in hand for this. It's not a pledge. It can't be a pledge of your refund because we have to pay the construction contractors. So while we were initially thinking that we needed to have the entire amount collected in 2025, we're going to be making progress bills on this over 15 months. So it's not as critical that it'll all come in 2025. There can be a partial gift in 25 or early 26, and that will also have year tax benefits for people that are interested. But we are going to have some kind of a mechanism, even if anonymous, to collect people's interest in writing. So you have done your surveys and said, I think I would give between 1,000 and 2,000 or whatever. We are going to have to take a step before we collect a single dollar that says, yes, me and my wife want to give 100,000 or whatever, 50 in 25, 50 in 26. Even without your name on it, name could be optional, but at least have something in writing that's a commitment rather than just clicking off on a survey to see if we're as close as we think we are. And then at that point, we would move into the next step, which is collecting funds in 25 and 26.
I just want to reiterate that it will be way more beneficial in 2025 if you can do it in 2025
And why
than
is that?
2026.
Just because it gets more
It
complicated
gets more
next year?
complicated. There's more limitations on the way that monies can be. There's a 0.5% limitation, which doesn't amount to a lot. But if, let's say, your income is $100,000 next year, you're going to have a $500 threshold. So if you make a $2,500 donation, you're only going to be able to deduct $2,000.
Okay.
There's also another AGI threshold that if you're in a 37% tax bracket, you're only going to get a deduction for 35%. You're going to be treated as if you're in the 35% tax bracket. So you're going to get a 2% shave there as well.
Okay. So it gets more complicated.
It's getting more complicated.
I'm going to go to Bill and then Jakob.
Hi, so I'm a volunteer income tax preparer for AARP. And one of the things we studiously avoid is the alternative minimum tax. Could you give me a few words about how alternative minimum tax applies in any scenario we might consider or not?
I don't think that we have enough information for 2026 to know how alternative minimum tax is going to affect anything. I mean,
How about 2025?
do you know?
No,
It's
okay.
minimal. It's minimal.
It depends on the return and the nature of what's driving
That's
the
right.
income. So that's really so specific.
Can you accept a CD that matures in June 2026? The proceeds of it for this?
I would say if there's a signed commitment form to do that, that's just working through the timing of the gift.
And that will be important. So, if we make the decision on Wednesday, which I'm feeling pretty good about based on the survey results, that we're going to proceed, we would ask you to give us a rough dollar amount and a rough estimate of when it would come in. And then, sign anonymously or sign from Bill and Betsy, whatever it is. So we can kind of calendar when they're going to come in. So we know from a cash flow perspective.
And another thing I want to reiterate is the timing of this project. If you can commit and it can start by October of this year, they are projecting a 15 to 18-month timeline on when it gets completed versus it not starting until 2028. So, starting in 2028, it won't be done until 2030, so it really is. That's why this is such a push for a capital campaign, because we don't want it to be part of the 2028 financing.
Mike, I'm concerned about what you're saying about the refundability in case we change our mind or whatever. Because I had been assuming that a firm commitment was going to be made as to 2025 this calendar year, so that if I were to write a check today, but it turns out that you're not going to be able to do the project until 2028, I would want my money, because I'm willing to contribute to have the project start in 2025. But for me, it's an entirely different calculation for 2020. I mean, my goodness, at our age, 3 years from now, I'm not as enthusiastic about contributing for the long term. So my bottom line question is, if I write a check today and by the end of this year, it's clear that we're not going to start, can I then get my donation back? And I simply don't record it then as a charitable donation for this year, because I didn't, I will not have spent the money this year because I would have gotten it all back.
So what we are going to do, as I'm thinking through this and talking out loud, is when we ask for written commitments before we accept a check from you, we're going to ask you, is this conditional on getting the whole thing? Because if we don't get there, we're not going to take a check from you in the first place. That's why these commitments are going to be very important. I don't want to take a check from somebody that doesn't want to go through with it unless we have the entire amount.
Yeah.
So just stay tuned on that, because it's going to be really hard to return it.
Yeah.
So we would want you to self-identify as someone that, yes, I'm in if it's a 2025 project, but if it's not, then I'm out. And we would count that differently in the commitment calculation.
Yeah, and I would say that that is a question we would have to ask legal counsel about, because I'm not sure a gift agreement with that proviso in it would count as a completed gift in the eyes of the IRS. And a conditional gift, in many cases, it's not eligible for the charitable tax. Now, it doesn't matter if you're going to get it back, you're not going to get the charitable tax deduction. But that would mean that Woodland Pond would have to move very fast.
Okay, so we'll just have to talk about that. But I really don't want to take anything from anyone that is conditional unless we have commitments for the 7 million. And then we can talk about where we'd go. But that next step of getting commitments, even if anonymous, is going to be really important for us. What other topics did you have that we didn't cover that are pertinent to this particular conversation?
I want to say, and there's a question back there while you're walking back, just briefly, we've talked a lot about assets such as stocks and bonds and mutual funds. There are other assets that people hold that, if they're marketable, a firm like Chris's, or most of your donor advised fund providers, if you're ready to liquidate, I don't know, a vacation home, that would be a harder one. But I mean, there are other assets that people hold that have value. If you can sell it, you can turn it into a deduction. That is not a blanket statement, because some of these sales can get quite complicated and quite drawn out. So, but it is something to think about as you're talking with your financial advisor.
So like a vehicle.
That's a bad example.
Okay, never mind. This is not my wheelhouse, not a vehicle.
Artwork.
Artwork, again, there's an established market. There are a lot of rules around it. You would want to work with a financial advisor, but yes, there are other assets that people own of value that are potentially good gifts. Cars are very complicated and they never return that much money.
Bars.
Jewelry is another example. I actually was once talking to a group of gentlemen also looking at a campaign who said, I never expect, well, what about a full-length mink coat? looked at him. He did not look like a mink coat guy. Let me tell you, he'd inherited it from his aunt. And I was like, well, if you can sell it, yeah. So,
Yeah, I mean, thinking about that, I have two hammers that I don't use much. Maybe I'll think about selling those. But besides that, I know we are talking about the financial consequences of donating and so, but a lot of people here, or I assume some people here, don't have a lot of money in reserve. And the things that we have is, for a rain day or rain season. And also we have children, sometimes we depend on us and so on. Would you make comments on that? Because I know everything, and we have other causes that we try to support.
I think this is where the conversation is important, not just with your advisors also. And this is, we're talking about, we're all asked for gifts every day, right? My email, my mailbox, whatever. Gifts of this nature for a capital campaign are in a little different category because they're generally gifts of your assets. And that's a bigger decision. It's a bigger gift. And that, yes, certainly is one you need to be in consultation with your professional advisors, but also with your family and with, as part of, as part and parcel of your overall financial and estate plans. Because, absolutely what Michelle said, we don't want anybody here impoverishing themselves for the sake of the PAC.
Another thing, you just mentioned families. I think Michelle has made it clear that she also wants to extend this to families who are happy that you're here, happy about the choice that you've made. And you might have family members that want to donate on your behalf to Woodland Pond as well. Right.
Thank you. I just have I have two questions. One is, what do you need? What does Woodland Pond need? What amount are you looking for? I'm going to assume it's not the $7 million in its entirety by Wednesday, but what amount are you looking for in total in terms of commitments? And my second question is, are there outside agencies or organizations that are also part of the capital campaign and not just residents and residents' families?
So I'm going to start with the second question first because it has come up quite a bit. We worked with the task force that we've had going since the fall and also provided the information to the Residents Council and to the Finance Review Committee as to the research that has been done to date in terms of foundations, private donors, endowments for the arts, all kinds of things. This project simply does not qualify for a lot of those things. And we pulled 8 or 9 examples out of the top, dozen in the state, region, and country and provided them to these groups because it's an attractive option, but this project doesn't check a lot of the boxes that a lot of those grants and gifts have attached to them. They're oftentimes looking to support projects that are related to supporting the arts, let's say in economically depressed areas, places where people don't have access to the arts and bringing them forth. There were a whole series of reasons that I actually am more than happy. We put together an entire summary. We looked at, for example, in this area, Novo and Dyson and some of the other ones. And Sally had indicated in her experience at the community foundations that even where you might have a regional foundation or a gift, they would be giving $3 million for the entire year, and a project like this may qualify for $10,000. Do you want to speak just a little bit more about that whole concept?
Sure. And actually, it happened last year. I was engaged as a consultant on a capital campaign across the river, and I spent a lot of time actually looking. And this was actually for underprivileged youth in Poughkeepsie. So so it checked a lot more boxes than frankly Woodland Pond does. And the reality is that there are very few private foundations in general that make capital gifts. And if they do, they're very often closely tied to a particular set of criteria. And so there's just not a lot of resources. The only exception, and it's a small one, is that there are a number of, and again, it would have to be a family member probably, or be a part of somebody's family here. There are some small private foundations, usually $1 million to $2 million. If that is part of your family's inheritance, they may be willing to make a larger gift out of their endowment corpus, and there's nothing that would stop them. But that's extremely rare. And that was actually a population I worked with on a regular basis at the Community Foundation, because they're often changing those over to donor advised funds. And most of them are doling out, they're using it just as you would use a fatter checking account that maybe you have of like, $1,000 here, $5,000 there.
So, I mean, we completely recognize that everyone at Woodland Pond, whether it be board members, residents, family members, everybody is in a different financial situation. And that there are going to be people that this is not something that you're interested in or can do or anything. But for us, it's important that we recognize that if you can give $100 and that's something that's a sacrifice to you, we recognize that as a sacrifice to you. There are some people that $100 is very comfortable, and there are others that $50,000 is very comfortable. And everyone is in a different situation, which is why it's so important to understand conversations with your families, particularly if they're relying on your assets or eventual income to support themselves. This is something that you should talk to them about if you're considering it. It's a family discussion, it's a legal discussion, it's a financial discussion. And for some of you, this is something you may not even consider. And this is why it will be great to have an opportunity to make anonymous advance commitments. We do not expect 100% of participation, although the board members have 100% committed, and so has our exec team. 100% of those two groups will be doing it at a level that's comfortable for them. None of us are going to be writing $1 million check. I can tell you that, but $100 might be comfortable for someone. We are also going to be talking to all of the design partners, the architect, the builder, the interior design firm, and putting it out in front of them and saying, listen, you're a huge part of bringing this to life. We're 3 years into paying you fees on design, and these are big bucks. Some of that can come back to the community towards this project. And I'd like to be able to stand here and say that not only is it 100% of the board and the exec team, but also 100% of the design partners on this project are making some kind of a contribution. But we need to be able to get commitments of some sort beyond just that survey monkey and really start seeing what we're talking about in dollars and cents before I can answer that a little bit more concretely. We're not going to be comfortable proceeding and collecting money if we get to 2 million install. So I can't give you the exact number, but I can tell you it's got to be more than half, and then probably a bit more just to collect the first check. What's that? Well, the total for the project is 7 million. Yes. And that includes roughly 15% contingency, all of the architect fees, the design fees, the construction, the chairs, the carpet, everything. But there is significant contingency in there, which we need to anticipate.
I have a question. Is it possible to consider an alternative, a less expensive version of the PAC, or one that's simplified down to the major things that a new structure would need, such as sound system, such as even heating, particularly acoustics? In other words, just so we have a choice, because it seems like, we've been reading the blueprints, there are people on committees, but we don't know what alternatives might be.
I can say, as past chair of the board, overseeing and working closely with our phenomenal staff helping with this, and they can speak more to it, but we looked at many alternatives, and this is what it costs to build a reasonable facility in 2025 dollars. I mean, this room to build this would probably be something like 800. I mean, it's ridiculous what things cost, but if you're going to do it, do it right, and it has room to grow and change with technologies. It's also going to be structured in a way that serves as a bridge, a overflow facility as we're making future renovations that we need to make to keep this community at the level it should be at in terms of the continual reinvestment, in in your home here. When I was interviewed for the council connections, I said Woodland Pond always needs to grow. It doesn't mean grow in size, but it means grow in quality and not fall backwards. So we need a place to move food service into when that space gets updated as it needs to be, and other places. So it takes all these needs into consideration. And yeah, it's very disappointing how much things cost. But in my personal opinion and all the work of everybody, we had a lot of cost engineering that went into this to reduce the expected costs. A lot of thought went into it over the past.
Well, we've been working on this for 2 years.
2 years, yeah.
So, I mean, to your point, Trina, this is not a project that has a lot of bells and whistles. You can see that it's a beautiful space, but there are a lot of things that would be considered as part of like a true production performing arts center. So there's certain capabilities related to sound and lighting that we decided we didn't need. But in terms of the basics of this, I think it's really important to conceptualize this has to be a freestanding building. And in order for it to meet the expectations of this community, it needs to look like it fits. So the aesthetic on the outside was very important, and making it look, and if you look at the images outside, that building looks designed as if it had always been here. And I think that's important to this community, that it doesn't just look like a square box. Acoustics is a huge part of this. And this room has no acoustical treatment at all other than these ceiling tiles. And for those of you that have been here for more than 3 months, you know how challenging acoustics are in this room. So I don't see that as being negotiable. I think the task force members from the Performing Arts Task Force and the interior design had made it clear that certain things like that are non-starters. We need to have a raised platform. It needs to be accessible. You want to speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think early on in the design process, we decided that we required a new performing arts center of a certain size. And through talking to our consultants and so on, and knowing our community, we thought that a PAC that held 200 people was the right place to be, because that would accommodate a whole range of activities, but also acknowledge the growth that we're going to go through with the new satellite campus on the Ermine property. And so it's, with that growth that we determined that was the size of the Performing Arts Center that we wanted. Now, having determined that we're going to build a building envelope that size, I think that part of our responsibility in the design process was to find that fine line between making sure that it accommodates all the activities that we want it to do, but also maintain a cost, do that at a reasonable cost and not go overboard. And so what that means is that for residents, it means that when you come to see a performance, you can hear everything in that performance. It means that if you are hearing impaired, you can hear everything in that performance or that presentation. It means that when something is on the screen, when we're doing a presentation, if you come in and you're sitting at the back, you're able to see everything on the presentation screen. These are the kinds of things where it's not we're not paying a high premium for these things. We're just making sure that this facility functions in all the ways that we want it to. And I think, we're not providing something that's really, gilding the lily. We're providing something that really functions well for all the residents' activities in that space. And I think that's really important. Once you've determined that you're going to build a certain facility, you've got to make sure that it functions and that everyone gets the enjoyment out of it that we planned for. Yeah.
I have two questions. One is, if you decide on Wednesday to go ahead, what date would you need these written commitments? That's my first question. And the second question is, if we go ahead and the PAC is built, have you thought about using it to get income leasing out the PAC to local drama groups or local music venues or local whatever to have an income?
So, to the first point, I don't know the answer to that question yet. It's not going to be a week. We recognize that this process that they just discussed takes time. So I would say 60 days, maybe 45 to 60 days. I mean, we need to know, but we need to be reasonable about the fact that there's complications here. So I don't know, maybe a month and a half, something like that.
Michelle, aren't you also going to offer services to have one-on-ones with people who want to?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the offer for any of us to have one-on-ones is also going to be an option during that period. But the real conversations are between yourselves, your financial advisors, and really kind of understanding that starts the discussion. In terms of income, we have to be extremely careful about taking non-related business income because of our 501c3 status. So while there might be some small opportunity there, we can never take any income if it exceeds the thresholds of the 501c3, if it's not directly related to our mission, because our 501c3 is tied to us because of our mission. So the opportunity there would be very small. Plus, we know we need this room all the time. You know, we know we're going to need that PAC all the time. And I think as it's more attractive and it brings the function that we hope that it's going to bring, I want to see that room filled every single day. You know, I'd love to have that not be a problem, but we do have to be careful about the 501c3 piece. I'm going to go to Steve, and then I think we're probably going to wrap up. And what I'm going to do is invite anyone that has additional questions that you think would be beneficial for the group to try to get them to me before my 12:15 tomorrow. We do have a series of questions that came up through the Survey Monkey. A lot of them were addressed today, but if you have something pressing, either just drop a note at Concierge, send me an email, or call me, and I will go through anything in my address tomorrow at 12:15 that we don't cover today. Okay.
Thanks. Now, I heard you say it is be a freestanding building. Two questions. Where will it physically be located? And if it gets moved up with this capital project, it's going to be soon. So how much of an impact will that have on living here at Woodland Pond pretty rapidly, and how will it impact what we currently have and getting around?
So there's an image outside the door here, and you can see it. This new PAC will sit fresh in front of the library. So it's going to be built in front of the library. It'll be right on the circle there. It fits nicely there, but as designed, it looks like it was here right from the start. In terms of your second question, whether the PAC begins in October or not is somewhat irrelevant because the rest of the construction in phase one is starting in October. So construction is going to commence whether it's on that building as well, because that can go simultaneously. But renovation in the existing campus is going to start as soon as we close that financing. I had a call with Department of Financial Services and Department of Health today and let them know that we're trying to take this to market and close on it on September 20th, which means our team would be mobilized to start no later than October 1st. There are actually some things that we can get them started on sooner if we know that the financing is going to happen. And now, as Dave has, I'm sure, mentioned on your address, or if not, we'll be talking about in earnest, the longer we wait here, the riskier we're getting with frozen ground. And so any place where site work needs to get done, the window's going to close. So we will have stuff going on simultaneously. So hopefully that answers that question a little bit. Have you invited everybody to go take a tour of South Storage now that it's empty to show them where our overflow space is going to be?
I haven't. I didn't know that it would get that much interest.
Oh, I'm sure they'd love to see it.
It's a lot of space down there. But just to follow on from what Michelle was saying, in many ways, the PAC is a parallel project because it can happen in an independent timeline. However, our construction manager is the same construction manager, and the subcontractors will be the same subcontractors for that portion of it. It just means that they'll bring more people in to do it. So,
and it's cheaper if they do it all at once. So
Yep.
if you've got the electrician here and they only have to mobilize once, there's just a lot of reasons that make sense to do it simultaneously, just from a big picture cost perspective. But I just want to be very
it's
clear.
in the hundreds of thousands of dollars
Saving.
in savings because of the professional fees that we save on from our architects and interior architects, but also for the oversight from the construction manager.
Right. All right. Well, I want to thank the three of you so much for coming. This has been very helpful. You know, this is something, this entire project. I mean, we're 3.5 years down the road of planning now, 22, 23, 24, 25. And this capital campaign has been talked about for a year and we're still yet to make a decision. So we appreciate the slog that it's taken to get to this point, and we appreciate everybody's patience. Yes. Oh, sorry. Yakov wants to say something. Oh.
Sally comes for council connections.
Oh.
On Thursday, the 27th.
Okay. So Sally's going to be here for council connections on Thursday, the 7th. But yes, thank you all for coming, and send me any additional questions that you'd like by 12:15 tomorrow, please.